You've been walking for 3 straight days. There are no paved roads out here, no maps, not even a name for the land stretching out ahead of you. Behind you is a lake that has slowly dried to mud. In front of you is a low ridge where the herd of antelope vanished just after dawn yesterday. You have no idea that you are leaving a continent or stepping into a grand historical migration. You only know a simple, urgent truth. The children need drinking water, the fire needs dry wood, and your old campsite simply cannot feed you anymore. So you keep walking, and a few thousand generations later, the footprints of countless small local decisions, just like that one, have covered almost the entire surface of the planet. But that leads us to a paradox that seems almost impossible to explain. How did early human hunter-gatherers, without compasses, without wheels, without roads, boats, or maps, manage to walk from the valleys of Africa to the harshest deserts, the freezing Arctic wastes, and the most remote islands in the ocean? Today, whenever we start a journey, we think in terms of a destination. You type a city into your phone, check the distance, buy a ticket, and know down to the minute when you'll arrive. But ancient humans didn't live in a world of predetermined destinations. They didn't have a concept of traveling to Asia or settling in Australia. To our ancestors, a massive journey was broken down into much smaller, immediate questions of survival. Where is the next valley with fresh water? Which way did the wind blow the grazing herds? Does that riverbank have good stone for shaping tools? And most importantly, can the children and the injured elders in our group actually survive the trek to get there? In-depth research on hunter-gatherer mobility patterns shows that they never just wandered randomly. They operated within a familiar network of seasonal campsites, only making short exploratory trips beyond the edges of that network when local resources began to fail. We traveled to reach a destination. They moved to navigate between opportunities for survival. So if most of human history moved at walking speed, what turned short shifts between water holes into global expansion, it certainly wasn't just a restless curiosity to explore the unknown. And it wasn't because a tribe packed up their lives and bolted thousands of miles the second they hit a drought. The answer lies in an evolutionary formula combining 5 core elements. The greatest endurance walking ability in the animal kingdom, temporary climate windows that open new pathways, a collective system of landscape memory, rapidly adapting survival technology, and above all, a quiet expansion effect unfolding over thousands of generations. To understand the weight of every footstep, you have to realize what they were actually gambling with. For you, taking a wrong turn means wasting a little gas or time. For prehistoric humans, one wrong turn could wipe out their entire bloodline. They had to navigate 4 lethal risks at the same time. First was water without a reliable water source. A vast stretch of land becomes an impassable brick wall, even if there isn't a mountain or ocean in sight. Second was food plants and animals changed drastically across different ecological zones. A plant that acts as medicine in your homeland could be a lethal poison in a new territory. Third was group speed. A solo hunter can run fast, but a tribe trying to survive has to move with newborn babies, pregnant women, and the elderly. The pace of civilization back then was capped by the walking speed of its most vulnerable member. And fourth was the way back. An exploratory trek into new land is completely useless if the scouts can't make it back to tell the tribe where the fresh water is. So what evidence have archaeologists and geologists uncovered about how our world was actually filled? Evidence number 1 shows that humans didn't walk in straight lines across continents. They followed temporary climate corridors. In the Al-Wusta Desert of the Arabian Peninsula, archaeologists discovered an 85,000-year-old Homo sapiens finger bone. The strange thing is, the Arabian Desert today is a bone-dry, lethal sea of sand. But ancient climate data reveals that back then, this region was a humid landscape packed with freshwater lakes, rivers, and African-style grasslands. The Arabian Desert was never a permanent wall. During shifting climate cycles, this wasteland transformed into a lush green corridor. Ancient humans didn't recklessly march across a parched desert. They waited patiently, and when the weather window opened, they simply walked along the lake's shores into a new world. When the water receded, thousands of years later, the door closed, and those communities put down roots right where they landed. Evidence number 2. They didn't carry folded paper maps. They shared a living map inside their collective memory. Without written language or GPS devices, how could a group remember directions across hundreds of miles of complex terrain? They encoded it into ecological signals and oral culture. They read the unique profile of a distant mountain peak, the flow direction of streams, the color of the dirt that signaled flint deposits underneath seasonal wind patterns, and the positions of the night stars. But more importantly, all of that knowledge was woven into myths, songs, and campfire rituals. One elder knew the location of the dry season waterhole. Another remembered when the migratory birds arrived. A child's lullaby contained the exact sequence of safe valleys. The map wasn't folded in one person's pocket. The map lived inside the social network of the entire tribe. Evidence number 3, territorial expansion, was actually a process of landscape learning. When stepping into a completely alien environment, like the freezing high altitudes of the Atacama Desert or dense, unfamiliar jungles, old knowledge only got them so far. Ancient settlement models show that humans always used a slow-inch strategy. They settled first in the easiest, most readable areas that were rich in resources and close to fresh water. There they took their time to experiment, learning to identify new plants, observing the behavior of unfamiliar animals, and modifying their hunting tools. Only after they mastered the local ecology and reached a stable population did the next generation push confidently into harsher terrain. They didn't need to know the entire road ahead. They only needed to know enough to survive the current step. Evidence number 4. Some lands simply couldn't be conquered on foot. Even during the peak of the Ice Age, when lower sea levels exposed vast stretches of land in Southeast Asia and connected multiple islands, there were still deep, turbulent ocean straits across Wallacea, separating them from Sahul, the landmass combining modern Australia and New Guinea. No one could accidentally walk there or just float over on a random driftwood log and survive. Oceanographic models and demographic data prove that settling the Australian continent 65,000 years ago required extraordinary intentional planning. Humans of that era had to engineer floating watercraft, read wind patterns, time their departures, and most importantly, they had to travel in groups large enough with men and women to establish a sustainable population on a completely new continent. That was the historical moment when human migration shifted from passively reacting to nature to actively planning for the future. And evidence number 5, grand migrations actually included pit stops that lasted for thousands of years. When we look at migration arrows on textbook maps, it is easy to assume our ancestors walked continuously from Africa all the way to South America without taking a break. But ancient genetic data reveals a very different rhythm. Isolate, recover, grow the population, interbreed with neighboring groups, then move again. For example, before spreading rapidly across North and South America, the ancestors of Native Americans were geographically isolated, stalled out in the freezing Beringia land bridge between Siberia and Alaska for thousands of years. That long pause wasn't a failure. That millennial standby was precisely what allowed them to genetically adapt to extreme cold and refine their heavy leather sewing technology. So when the glaciers finally melted, their descendants were ready to burst out and spread at breathtaking speed all the way to the southern tip of the earth. But here is a fact that will completely flip your perspective. When modern humans, Homo sapiens, began our successful expansions out of Africa roughly 70,000 years ago, we were nowhere near the first to do it. At the Dmanisi site in Georgia, archaeologists uncovered skulls and stone tools belonging to our ancient human cousins dating back 1.8 million years. And across Eurasia, early hominin traces show up as early as nearly 2 million years ago. These early human pioneers didn't have large, powerful brains like ours. They had no complex language, and they carried only the simplest stone flakes. That proves that the drive and capacity to push beyond the comfort zone isn't a special trait exclusive to Homo sapiens. It is an evolutionary code deep within the bloodline of the entire Homo genus. Going back 2 million years, bodies built for long-distance endurance, walking flexible digestive systems that could eat everything from roots to bone marrow, and an intense social instinct to cooperate when resources got tough. All of this was powered by a quiet yet unstoppable mechanism, the generational ratchet effect. Imagine a tribe living within a familiar range of about 60 miles. Year after year, they only rotate between the streams and forests within that circle. Then during a severe drought, a few hunters decide to scout 15 miles further than usual, and they discover a lush, untouched valley. They return and guide the tribe there to set up camp. A few babies are born in this new valley. To the parents, this is a strange, newly discovered frontier. But to those infants, this valley is simply home. 20 years later, when those children grow up, they use this very home as their starting line to push the horizon another 15 miles out. Scout, return, remember, give birth, then turn the edge of the world into home. That is how the evolutionary ratchet turns click by click, never slipping backward. When powered by favorable climate windows, fire technology, and social networks between tribes, that ratchet transformed millions of ordinary everyday footsteps into a total conquest of the Earth's surface. And that brings us to a profound insight about human nature. In popular culture, we love to celebrate lone explorers, the brave heroes who march boldly into the unknown and never look back. But in the brutal prehistoric world, someone who walked away into the wilderness and never returned left zero legacy for the evolution of our species. The real hero of the ancient world was the one who came back. It was the hunter who found fresh water deep in the mountains, but patiently memorized every rock formation so he could return and lead the thirsty children to safety. It was the woman who discovered an edible tuber in the forest and brought it back to the campfire to teach the tribe how to cook it without being poisoned. Exploration is just a meaningless personal adventure unless it is brought home. The act of returning is what transformed individual survival into community memory, turned memory into culture, and turned culture into a survival map that helped humanity reach further. Our greatest power isn't just the courage to step into the dark. It's the ability to carry the light of understanding back to those who are waiting for us. Today you sit in your car and turn on your GPS. A voice from the speakers guides you through every turn, warning you which stretch of road is jammed or slippery. We tend to think of that technology as modern magic, but in reality, the smartphone in your hand is just an externalized version of a very ancient cognitive skill. Those digital pins on your map are the water holes our ancestors memorized. Those real-time traffic alerts are the warnings of a scout who just returned to the campfire. The core logic of navigation hasn't changed a bit in 300,000 years. We still break a long journey down into manageable rest stops. We still need fuel, water, and safety. And we still rely on the accumulated wisdom of the people who walked the path before us. The only difference is our ancestors didn't have a pre-printed map of the world to fold into their pockets. They patiently shaped the world's map with their own surviving footsteps. No single ancient human ever set out to walk around the entire Earth. But over thousands of generations, one small group after another quietly carried the horizon just a little bit further, until there was hardly a mountain, a river, or a lonely island left on this planet that sat outside the reach of human memory and human connection.